G'day, I'm Mr. Morosi. One morning, I was eating breakfast and almost choked on my girlfriend's earrings. So I thought, with Christmas fast approaching, maybe I could make her a new jewellery box. But it won't just be any box. I want to make it personal by sculpting a brass plate with the contours of where we live. That shouldn't be too hard, right? Well, as it turned out, I had a few things to learn and a few setbacks to overcome. I did a quick sketch of what I think it would look like. Wood on the sides, brass on the top, couple of dividers. Simple. I visited my local wood dealer, who hustled me out of $160 for this beautiful black wood. He also threw in a strip of wenge, because you know, the first one's free. He was kind enough to thickness it for me, but it left a few channels which needed to be sanded out. I began by cutting the sides, and with the excitement of finally getting started, I also cut the top and bottom to the same exact measurement, halving my box width instantly. So I spoke with the client, and we agreed to continue with the new size. Back on track, I used my new cross-cut sled to cut the length of the side pieces. And then drop the blade to score out the rebates for the top and bottom panels. I looked to YouTube for the best way to cut mitres and found God in Katz Moses' approach. This jig was actually my first cross-cut sled, which wouldn't slide on two runners. So I just cut the thing in half and problem solved. A backing piece gave me a cut reference, and a stop block made each side exactly the same. And as the saying goes, the proof is in the pudding, which is lucky because it's Christmas, and I'm pretty sure I have court next week. I cut the top and bottom panels to fit exactly. But then I remembered, wood moves. So I trimmed them down a couple of mils, which just gave it a little bit of growing room. Things were going pretty well at this point, but before moving on I sought the advice of the best carpenter I know, this possum, who is locked up in my attic. He told me wood glue makes raw blackwood go green, so I should pre-finish everything. I double-checked with a test, and he was right. Thanks, Possum. And so started everyone's favourite YouTube viewing, Sandy. I applied a good coat of linseed oil, which really brought out this magnificent shellac shimmer, which I did not expect. And it made me think, I may have been hustled, but I definitely wasn't wood swindled. I'm pretty cheap, and won't fork out on a new thin kerf blade. So I was pretty pleased the stock blade on my saw left enough of the grain to match with the next piece. Stupidly, I didn't consider that the tape won't stick to the wood because it's now covered in oil. So gluing this box became a little tricky. It's also 35 degrees in the workshop, so my glue was drying quicker than Bob Hawke could scull a beer. And then without warning, I caught the flu. But time was of the essence. and I had a box to finish. I made another jig to cut the spline rebates, including these awesome contrasting hinge splines to help strengthen the mitre joints. You definitely start to feel like a real woodworker when you make a jig, which I needed because I definitely wasn't feeling 100% for the most important step of all: cutting the lid. A few cuts later, and some fancy scalpel work, we had a lid. I expect the box will hold a lot of cereal, so I divided the bottom into 4 fixed sections and included another smaller box on top, which could slide and be removed. At this point, I had dialed in the rebating, mitre cutting and dado joints, so it was pretty straightforward. At the last minute, I divided the bottom into 6 sections to try my hand at a cross-lap joint, which worked pretty well. Now it was just a final sand, oil, glue, and assemble. But that led me to the hardest thing of all, the hinge. I abandoned this crappy one that I bought from my local hardware store for a premium hold-open brass hinge, and barreled forward with the newfound confidence of a man who appears to know what he is doing. So I routed the depth, cut some hairs, straighten the mortise, but the hinge just wouldn't work. So I consulted YouTube.
How to install a hinge.
And then I learnt. This is how this hinge works. After a rough sleep and a new dawn, I paused to consider how to rectify my mistake, but just couldn't think in all this mess. As they say, a dirty bench is a dirty mind. The first mistake I had to fix was the old holes I'd already drilled. I decided I didn't quite like the large square barrel poking out the back so much, so I bought some new quality brass butt hinges. But the next challenge was to get the holes perfectly centre and to shim the lid mortise to preload the hinge for a flush close. I think I repeated this process about 4 times, and finally, At 11:32 a.m, Thursday, the 14th of December, after an embarrassing 4 hours, a box was born. Now that the box was done, it was time to get personal. I took a sheet of brass I had lying around and cut an oversized piece to set into the lid. The plan is to immortalise this time of our lives with the contours of the hills of where we live. After roughly tracing some contours, I transferred them to the brass with the old pencil carbon copy method and outlined that with a Sharpie. I kicked the spider's house over for a stool and gently ushered him away so I could get to work. Carefully, I bashed the brass along the contour lines, using the edge of this ironwood block for definition, flipping the brass over to choreograph the undulations. Eventually, it starts to come together like a beautiful piece of music. I really wrestled with how to cut the top perfectly. If it didn't fit, we have an entire hinge debacle on our hands again. And then it hit me. I have a table saw. So I present to you the jankiest, most janktastic jig ever to be proud of. The Dremel is attached to my sliding mitre lead, and unlike the saw, will move over the cut piece. It was, if I don't say so myself, a stroke of genius. But we're not done. I wanted to make this box truly unique, a one of a kind. I'd experimented before with blue patinas and copper jewellery, but was worried it would ruin the box. So like a good Australian, I gambled the decision. And heads called blue. The process is simple. You pour salt water over the metal and lock it in a box with some commercially available urine. The fumes react, and after some days, I'd say the gamble paid off. I glued some blocking pieces to the underside and gave it a coating of this special metal varnish, which should stop the patina from continuing. Once it dried, I glued it to the top. And after one last oil and wax, I could complete the final assembly and close the lid on this project for good.